living systems are composed of information. So your body, take the average adult human body, has 100 trillion cells in it. 100 trillion cells, that's a big number, right? If you can't grasp that number, just think of our new national debt. 100 trillion cells. If you took the DNA out of one cell, and you know DNA is like a ladder that's twisted, you can picture it. If you pulled it out and you uncoiled it, the DNA in one cell in your body would be about 9 feet in length. That means all the DNA in your body would go from here to the sun and back about 70 times. Now what does DNA do? It stores information. One estimate by Richard Dawkins, interestingly enough, said the DNA in one cell in your body has the equivalent of 8 billion letters, 500 million words, or 8,000 books. 8,000 books! That's a lot of information. In fact, one study said the amount of information in your cell in one cell in your body is equivalent of the storage capacity of 500,000 DVDs. Wouldn't you like to have a memory stick with 500,000 movies on it? Some of you would still get bored. So here's the question. If at the tiniest cell we see more complexity, more sophistication than any technology humans can come close to creating, the question is, how do you get this technology and information at the smallest level in a naturalistic world in which there's no mind? Do you see the problem? How does this happen? Well, to make a long story short, there is no atheist explanation for the origin of life. Any honest atheist would say they don't have a clue, including Bill Nye, the science guy. When he was debating, Ken Ham conceded, he goes, we don't have any explanation for the origin of life, and there never will be one apart from an intelligent agent. So let me make a point. This is important. Visualize this. When I said the more we learn about science, what happens? The smaller the gaps become. You know what the truth is? That's right. The more we learn, the bigger the gaps become. And the more we realize that Psalms 19:1 and 2 is correct. It says, the skies proclaim the glory of God. The heavens declare his majesty. Day by day they spew forth speech. Night by night they display knowledge. So think about it. There's information in the cell. Whenever you come across information, and we can trace it to its source, what do we always find? What do we always find when we have information and trace it to its source? What do we find? What kind of source? What do we find? If you get a text, you trace to its source, what do you find?
A human.
An intelligence, right? This is not a trick question. Look, you have a book, you trace it to an author. You have a magazine, you trace it to a journalist. You get a text and it's legible, you trace it to a texter. If we go outside and in the clouds it says, drink Coke, and I say, what is that? None of you would say, yep, this happens in New England when a storm is coming down from Canada. If it says drink Coke, you would trace that back to a pilot, a mind who wrote it. Well, when you look inside DNA, we see more information that is more sophisticated than anything humans are close to creating. Couldn't happen by chance. I think the best explanation is the information in the cell points towards an author of life. That's what I believe. Let me do 2 or 3 more and then we'll break here. Yes, in the back. Dark hair, all the way in the back. Yep, you. Stand up and be loud so I can hear you. Okay, hold on. 6 days of creation. Just because of time, I can talk to you at the break. Let me address the issues that I threw out there as objections and answer those. But I would love to talk to you about that at the break. 6 days of creation, if you'd like to. That's an important question. Specific objections I threw out you want me to make sense of. Yes, all the way in the back, Mr. I won't call you Mr. Pigman, but you had a good one. Yeah. Okay, so if you're asking me to, this is the first time, no pun intended. maybe the second that somebody's asked me about God and time. Christians differ over the relationship between God and time. I happen to think that God is timeless, sans creation, which means without creation, I think God is timeless. I think at the first moment of creation, God entered into time. Now, this is not an essential change within God, because it says in the Bible God is changeless. It's a change in God's external relationship to a world that he creates. So I do think God is in time right now. Now, he has perfect knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. But I think God is in time with creation. And there's nothing incoherent with that. Now, it would raise a whole bunch of questions that we could talk about for hours. But I think there's very logical, reasonable ways to make sense of how God relates to time. In fact, look, think about this. You asked where the universe came from, and I said the universe came from nothing. And some of you laughed at me. And believe it or not, that's actually the appropriate response. I'm serious. Not that we should ever laugh at somebody's beliefs. That's what I'm implying. But to say that something can come from no thing is metaphysically absurd. The only way people can argue that quantum mechanics explains the origin of matter is by redefining what is meant by nothing. I'm serious. Listen, this is a big deal all over the debate world in theology. Lawrence Krauss argues you can get something from nothing. But what he means by nothing is something very different than what you and I mean. By nothing, we don't mean when you open up the refrigerator and you go, Mom, Dad, there's nothing in here. There's actually something in there, right? Just not what you want. Nothing means no thing, not anything. All right? In the world of physics, Lawrence Krauss and others say, well, nothing is actually quantum particles. Well, if quantum particles are there, then it's not nothing, and you have the question of where did those quantum particles come from? And if they haven't been there eternally, then there has to be a source outside of time, beyond the universe, that's not physical, that's smart and powerful to bring the universe into existence. That sounds a lot like God. So the beginning of the universe, taught uniquely in Genesis 1, points towards there being a beginner or a cause outside of the universe to bring it into existence. It's called the cosmological argument for the existence of God. And that's another example. Scientists used to think the universe was eternal. In the 20th century, we realized it had a beginning, which points towards a cause outside of the universe to bring it into existence. Which is why a leading scientist who works at NASA in the 20th century, when they discovered the universe had a beginning, he said, it's as if scientists are climbing the mountain of knowledge about the origin of the universe. They get to the very top, they peer over, and they see a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Let's do one or two more. Sunday morning, should I go? One more, he says. He's the boss. He's bigger than me. The basketball player, though, I still think I could take you, though, just for the record. You're on, man. One last question, and then I'm going to answer one myself. I took one over there. Sorry, we'll go over here. Got to be good, related to what I asked. Go ahead, quickly.
Okay, so related to morality, free will.
Okay, free will didn't come up. That's a great question. I don't think without God you can have free will. Why? If there is no God, all you are is physical matter. There's no soul. You're just physical matter. Well, think about it. Physical matter operates according to its physical nature and by external forces that act upon it. There can be no free will if there is no soul or thinking self independent of matter. So if there can't be free will, you can't even have morality. I can't say to you, you should be nice to your sister, because when I say you should do something, that implies that you can do something. But if you're physical matter and there's no free will, you can't do anything beyond what you're pre-programmed by the laws of nature to do. So the fact that we have free will and we know it tells us there's something that makes us up besides physical matter. And I think the existence of free will is one argument or evidence that the soul is very real. I do think the soul is real, and I think there's good evidence for it. Let me answer this one. I'm going to tag it on. I know I'm pushing it, but Here's the answer. I said, if you say God made the world, then you're left with a problem. Who made God? Track with me on this, okay? Listen very carefully. This is a nonsense question. It's nonsense. It's what's called a categorical fallacy. To say who made God is like saying, how much does the color purple weigh? It's like saying, what does the musical note C smell like? You'd say color and weight are distinct categories. You shouldn't confuse them. Sound and smell are distinct categories. Well, why is it a category of confusion to say who made God? Because it only logically makes sense to ask who made something of things that can be made. Right? Okay, track with me. Listen, even despite that sound, I hear it too. It only logically makes sense to say who made something of things that can be made. So I could say, who made your boots? I could say, who made this chair? We could ask who made this building because these are the kinds of things that can be made. But by definition, God can't be made. God is a self-existent being. So to ask who made God, you're basically saying, who made the unmakeable creator of the universe? Or if you say, what caused God? You're saying, what caused the uncaused creator of the universe? Which is a nonsense question, like asking, how much does the color purple weigh? Or what does the color purple smell like? It's nonsense. Okay? Now, we're way over, but this has been really fun. There are some resources that can help you. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to discount them all down for students. There's a bunch out there. I'm going to mention two. Okay? One is a book I call Is God Just a Human Invention? Wrote this with a pastor friend of mine. And the whole purpose of this is to answer the biggest questions, most of them you asked. The origin of life, the origin of the universe, the origin of morality is a question. Is there evidence for the soul? How could a loving God send somebody to hell? What about the problem of evil? What about genocide in the Old Testament? These really tough questions. Okay, this normally sells 17. Everything back there I didn't mark it. It's all 25% off for students. Okay? Free shipping too, which means you just pick it up and walk home with it. Okay? 25% off. If you're sitting there going, I need to go deeper, I want to understand this, this would be one that would it would certainly help you out. The other one is just called the Apologetics Study Bible for Students. Apologetics doesn't mean saying you're sorry. It means giving a reason for the hope within. It's a Bible. There's paperback and hardback. It's filled with all these cool features like story, archaeological finds, study notes at the bottom, but we got the top 120 questions. Students asked about God, other religions, ethical issues, the Bible, with one-page, concise, interesting answers, including my favorite question. If God made everything, why is it wrong to smoke pot? Honestly, that's a great question. How do you think about that as a Christian? So this was already marked down. I'm going to mark it down 25% lower if that helps you out. All right? When we come back after break, we're going to deal with a real sensitive issue. An issue that honestly is kind of the elephant in the room. It's all over culture. But sometimes as Christians, we're afraid to think about the issue of homosexuality. I'm going to do my best to be compassionate and be loving about this, but also look, ultimately, the big question is, I think you're right about this. What does the Bible teach about this issue? Our ultimate authority should be the Scriptures, not society, not our friends. What does the Scriptures teach? And we're going to look at that after lunch. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to sneak out to my book table. I'd love to sign a book, answer your question, young lady in the back about the age of the earth. Any other questions you have, I'm here to help if I can during the break.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean.